meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 5 at the House of Commons Standing Committee and Fisheries and Oceans. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted on January 8, 2022, the committee is meeting on its study of flood control and mitigation systems in British Columbia. The meeting, of course, is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25, 2021. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website, and so you are aware, the webcast will show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. Please inform me immediately if interpretation is lost and we'll ensure it is restored before resuming. The raise hand feature at the bottom of the screen can be used if you wish to speak or alert the chair. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name, and for those by video conference, please click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself before speaking. And of course, when you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. I would now like to welcome our witnesses for today, of course, from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, Sarah Murdoch, Senior Director, Pacific Salmon Strategy Initiative, Pacific Region, and Mr. Brad Fanos, Director, Fish and Fish Habitat Protection Program, Pacific Region. I also want to welcome, of course, Mark Strahl from Chilliwack Hope, and as well Ed Fass from Abbotsford, back to the committee. They've been past members on this committee, so welcome back, gentlemen. I'm sure everything West Coast is of the utmost importance to you guys as well, and look forward to your participation today. We will now proceed with opening remarks for 5 minutes. And I don't know if Brad or Sarah's doing the opening remarks. And I would like to remind members as well, when you're doing questioning, I will be very strict as possible on the time. I'll tell you how much time you have, and hopefully you live within that. I don't like cutting people off, but I will if I have to. So again,
Mr. Chair, just yes,
Mr.
point of order, please, at the beginning. Don't worry, anybody. This is not a motion I want to put on the table or nothing like that. Don't ask for a recess. Je veux juste prendre quelques minutes.
I just wanted to take a few minutes because I know that last week Ms. Desbiens wished me a happy birthday at the committee, so I would like to do the same because I hear rumors that it is her birthday today. So unlike you, I will not sing happy birthday. I am not really a great singer, but I do wish you a very happy birthday. And perhaps we can get you a new headset for your birthday for the next meeting. A very happy birthday, Ms. Desbiens.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's from everybody to Ms. Desbiens. Happy birthday. And Serge, I'm glad you didn't sing happy birthday because we probably would take off our headpieces or earpieces if you start singing, and probably leave the meeting. But again, to Ms. Murdoch for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you very much. Bonjour and good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Sarah Murdoch, and I'm the Senior Director of the Pacific Salmon Strategy Initiative. My colleague and I appreciate the opportunity to appear before this committee today on behalf of Fisheries and Oceans Canada. We all share a deep concern for Pacific salmon and appreciate the committee's study on the potential impacts of flood mitigation systems on this important species. This concern is rooted in the department's core mandate of fish conservation and protection. I'm accompanied today by Brad Fanos, as mentioned, the Director of Fish and Fish Habitat Protection Program here in Pacific Region. And after my opening remarks, we look forward to answering any questions you may have. J'aimerais commencer par donner une
I would like to begin by providing a brief overview of the department's efforts to assess and address the impacts of November's extreme flooding on fish and fish habitat in British Columbia.
Several riverine fish species and populations. This includes the Pacific salmon eggs and juvenile salmon in rivers and streams across portions of Vancouver Island, the Squamish River watershed, Lower Fraser River watershed, and the Thompson and Nicola Rivers near Merritt, British Columbia. In some cases, eggs have been washed away or covered with sediment. In others, scour and erosion from high water flows have likely altered or removed salmon spawning and rearing habitats. Currently, the department is working hard to assess and better understand the potential impacts to salmon and other species from the flood events. And following the spring freshet, which is when snow and ice melt into rivers and raise water levels and flows in early spring, the impacts will become more evident. That said, it may take several years to understand the full impact of the flooding to some Pacific salmon stocks, given their 2 to 5 year life cycle. Over the next few months, DFO will be continuing its stock assessment work while also prioritizing activities and actions to mitigate impacts and support restoration of fish and fish habitat. This will include working with the province of British Columbia, Indigenous groups, local governments, environmental NGOs, local stewardship partners, and others to both, one, assess the impacts, and secondly, to determine what would be effective short, medium, and long-term actions to promote recovery. As well, DFOs will be continuing to provide strategic support regarding salmon habitat restoration opportunities for impacted habitat related both to natural river processes and also longer-term infrastructure rebuilding. The department has established an internal flood response task team responsible for coordinating input from subject matter experts across our program areas to support broader interagency flood response and planning that's underway. We are also reevaluating current restoration techniques and priorities to help ensure that going forward, salmon habitat restoration work in the future is able to withstand extreme weather and will support fish populations that may be vulnerable to climate impacts. Going forward, DFO expects to be engaged in both local and regional flood infrastructure decisions, either in a planning or project review capacity. For example, in our regulatory role, we review project proposals to assess the potential impacts to fish and fish habitat, as well as provide advice to support mitigation and avoidance of impacts. The recent flooding highlights the many challenges facing Pacific salmon and the need for DFO to take action. And as committee's members know, up to 50 populations of southern Chinook and sockeye populations here in British Columbia are slated for COSUWIC consideration in the coming years. Many Indigenous communities have been unable to meet their basic food, social, and ceremonial fishery needs, and both commercial and recreational harvesters have been restricted in recent years to help protect the stocks of concern. The $647 million Pacific Salmon Strategy Initiative will guide and support our efforts going forward to conserve and rebuild salmon populations. And with that includes two key pillars, the conservation and stewardship and integration and collaboration that apply to the work here regarding the flood response. Under the conservation and stewardship pillar, DFO will be focused on improving habitat monitoring and assessment, on integrated planning for salmon ecosystems, and strategic support for habitat restoration. On this last point, we are creating a Salmon Habitat Restoration Center of Expertise, which will complement existing programming and partnerships by providing technical experts to external groups undertaking salmon habitat restoration work. As you know, the initiative also includes a commitment to double the federal contribution to the jointly governed and managed BC DFO, BC Salmon Restoration and Innovation Fund, which we call BC SRIF, to support the salmon stewardship and restoration work led by external partners across British Columbia, which complements the efforts of the department. Under the integration and collaboration pillar of PSSI, DFO will be continuing to strengthen our partnerships with the governments of British Columbia and Yukon, as well as First Nations. As you know, with regards to salmon habitat, there is shared jurisdiction, and so it's imperative that we continue our efforts to work closely with each other. At a more local level, DFO will also be undertaking collaborative integrated planning to identify strategic actions to mitigate and adapt to the impacts of climate change and enable better outcomes for our salmon populations. The impacts of the recent flooding to BC have been devastating for many communities. As we continue to better understand the impacts of the floods on salmon and other species, we'll be continuing to work with our partners in a strategic and coordinated way. Through the PSSI and other programs, we'll be working to bring together the expertise required, both inside and outside of DFO, to ensure that salmon habitat restoration work will be most effective, which includes taking into account future extreme weather impacts. I'd like to thank the committee for conducting this study and providing us the opportunity to discuss the impacts with you today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Computer not agreeing with my finger trying to get off mute. But anyway, thank you for that, Ms. Murdoch. And before we go to the questioning, I just want to remind members of the committee, for the purposes of interpretation, please speak slowly and clearly And it's a great benefit as well if you identify who you're actually asking the question to instead of just leaving it wide open for either witness to answer. So if you know who you want it to go to, please include that in your question as well. To start off, for 6 minutes or less, we'll go to Mr. Arnold.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your opening presentation. This is certainly important to everyone on the West Coast, I think, how we're going to respond to these floods and how the salmon are going to respond to actions taken. One key question, I guess, you've identified the Pacific Salmon Strategic Initiative and how that is going to be used in guiding and supporting the efforts. The PSSI was announced prior to the floods. What PSSI allocations or funds will be reassigned due to the flood?
Thanks for the question. Mr. Chair, is it all right for me to answer? Great. At this point, we're not looking to necessarily reallocate resources from the Pacific Salmon Strategy Initiative or PSSI. What I tried to highlight in my opening remarks is there are some very obvious clear areas of alignment. One obvious place may be the applicability of flood response efforts under BC SRIF, which we will be jointly delivering the expansion of with the province of BC. But in terms of, for instance, the Center of Expertise for Habitat Restoration that we are in the process of setting up, that's very much aligned with the types of work that will be done or will be needed particularly over the medium to long term in terms of salmon habitat restoration. Similarly, work we are looking to do with the province and other partners on the ground around more integrated ecosystem planning that takes climate adaptation into account. We, under PSSI, will have more capacity to participate in processes like that. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Murdoch. You mentioned the Salmon Habitat Restoration Center of Expertise just now, and you've initiated that. I take it, when can we expect that to be up and running and be available to organizations that want to make use of it?
We are looking to have that stood up in this next fiscal year. We have a director in place now for a new stewardship directorate, and the Center of Expertise will be a key component of that. I would say we do have capacity now through our resource restoration unit. It's smaller group, but we will be expanding that over the next fiscal year.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned also that there are up to 50 populations of southern Chinook and sockeye populations slated for COSAWIC consideration over the coming few years. How many stock assessments were complete for these stocks affected by the flood prior to the flood, and how many are complete for this year?
I'm going to see if my colleague, Mr. Fanos, has answer. I am not familiar with our annual stock assessment program sufficient enough to answer your question. We could certainly do so in writing. We do have a quite a robust regular stock assessment program. And under our species at risk program, we also obviously do additional work as populations go through that regulatory process. But I would believe that many of those species or stocks would be picked up and covered off in our quite extensive broad Fraser.
If we could get that information in writing, please, to the committee, that would be great. Can you also tell me how many Thompson and Nicola Chinook, interior Fraser steelhead may have been in the rivers affected at this time? How many spawning pairs may have been in the rivers affected, and how were they affected by the floods? That's the Thompson, or the interior Fraser steelhead, both the Thompson and the Chilcote.
We will have to get back to you with that in writing, if that's all right, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. I also noted your speaking points. Some of the terms were quite vague from the department, that there would likely be effects and likely be effects on spawning channels. Is there any reason the department can't be more definitive in this?
I'm going to ask my colleague, Mr. Fanos, who will do a better job at responding to your question, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair and member, I think if I've got the question right, do you mind repeating the question? I think it was related to the restoration impacts of DFO type facilities, but do you mind repeating it, please?
No, the question was, does DFO have estimates on the number of adult interior Fraser steelhead that may have been impacted by the floods?
Yes, on that particular item, I think Sarah is accurate. We should be following up with the appropriate authorities. And I know BC in particular has management responsibilities for steelhead in particular. So we'd be coordinating with BC to get that information.
And the other question was regarding the rather vague statements in here. One is that the flooding is likely to have impacted several riverine species. Is there a reason the department can't be more definitive?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Mr. Chair. The response to that question would be clearly rivers are dynamic systems that go through these types of fluctuating water flows. This is a particularly severe event that occurred in the fall. And so the impacts are anticipated to be much greater, and we can see as such with some of the systems that we've seen, particularly in the Nicola, Chilliwack, Lower Mainland systems. And in understanding what these impacts would look like over time, we're going through a seasonal change in the hydrological graph. And so we're going to be looking at the spring as a bit of a trigger to see what the impacts may look like for channel morphology. The rivers change through the cycle of the year, and we're probably not likely to see what these impacts are until after the spring freshet, once we can actually see after the spring high flows, where we're looking at terms of the fish habitat and the features there. We will know, and we do know, the various restoration facilities and hatcheries that we're operating in terms of the nature of the impacts at those facilities, but the broader systems like the Nicola, Coldwater, Spice, for example, those would take a longer time to assess at different times in the year to understand what the nature of the impacts are.
Thank you for that. We'll now go to Mr. Hardy for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Murdoch and Mr. Fanos for being with us. I'm grateful to the committee, by the way, for agreeing to do this and for making it our first study, actually, as we enter this new session. And the reason I thought that there was some time sensitivity to this was the fact that we were witness to damage to some of the flood control systems, particularly along the lower Fraser. And I was thinking that this obviously presented an opportunity to perhaps improve those systems on behalf of the salmon runs as they were being restored or perhaps rebuilt. And so I don't know if Ms. Murdoch or Mr. Fanos could answer this one, but what do we know about the extent of damage to the flood control systems along the Fraser?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Hardy. As I mentioned, we certainly know there was impacts to salmon, particularly to salmon that was juvenile salmon, and Mr. Fanos can speak more directly to what we anticipate were the immediate impacts. Unfortunately, the actual, apologies, I just want to make sure, am I still connected?
Yes, you are. And I was asking about the infrastructure, not the fish.
And I apologize, my screen just went blank, but as long as you can hear and see me, that works. Yes, we definitely, in terms of our own DFO infrastructure, had some significant issues that we were not able to assess immediately just because of the emergency nature and the limit of ability and access to different sites. We are in the process of making immediate repairs there, as are others. Mr. Fanos is actually responsible for the program that issues some of the regulatory permits around some of the broader emergency flooding infrastructure that is being put in place immediately. And we are coordinating with those, I think primarily through the province of British Columbia, in terms of ensuring that the appropriate permitting is in place from a regulatory perspective around protecting fish and fish habitat regarding flooding infrastructure. But I don't know if I can pass it to Mr. Fanos, he might be able to expand on that.
Yeah, I would actually appreciate that. What do we know so far about opportunities that exist to perhaps improve the flood control systems and make them more fish friendly?
Right. Appreciate the question. And Mr. Chair, I guess addressing the committee on this question, Yeah, we know a fair bit. Certainly our program, the Fish and Fish Habitat Protection Program, has been working quite closely with a lot of the local municipalities and regional districts during the flooding events themselves to make sure that we were supporting them in terms of actions they were taking during the flood events to try and mitigate and avoid some impacts to fish and fish habitat while doing that important infrastructure repair work immediately in the time. Now we're moving into the recovery phase, and we know there's quite a large area in obviously the Sumas and Chilliwack areas that we're going to need dike repairs. There's many floodgates which pass water from either the Fraser River into the various systems. These are critical areas for fish passage and access issues, as I'm sure well aware. And so there's an opportunity as we're doing these upgrade works in the coming weeks, months, years, frankly, to continue to work with those various local governments in the project review functions, as Sarah indicated, but also proactively just trying to ensure the best practices. Many of these features were developed 50 years ago or longer. And so the design features for fish-friendly aspects weren't necessarily available. So there's a tremendous opportunity, and we will be working with local governments and the British Columbia government for all those opportunities as we're starting to rebuild for the fish-friendly. And I should note, there's been a tremendous amount of work by the ENGOs, people like Watershed Watch Society, for example, who've done a very excellent job working with others to sort of prioritize and understand the number of flooding infrastructure issues and where there's opportunities and priorities related to improvements for fish and fish habitat.
Now, do we expect that there will be an ask of the federal government for funding support as these systems are restored and hopefully improved? Ms. Murdoch, perhaps that's best to you.
At this point, as Brad said, we're working closely with our provincial and local government colleagues, and obviously there's been a significant amount of federal funding provided to support the emergency response writ large. So we want to make sure that funding is done in a way where DFO is participating and informing the spending of that money as much as possible. We've not had any specific conversations regarding specific, I guess, salmon-friendly projects per se. Other than I think some very preliminary conversations around the fact that type of work would likely be would definitely be eligible under our BC Salmon Restoration and Innovation Fund. Thank you.
Now, we also saw flooding events in Merritt and in Princeton. And so if there were no flood control measures, say, for instance, on the Coldwater River or the Nicola or the Similkameen, I would imagine we can expect some then to be put in place. Do you know what the status of any flood control measures that were there, or were they just basically non-existent prior to the flooding incident? Mr. Fanos, would you know this?
Yes, the various systems you've indicated, whether it's the Merritts in the Merritt area in particular and around Similkameen, around Princeton, most of those features aren't quite the same as the Lower Mainland, where you saw lots of agricultural activity and lots of heavy diking. There are dikes in those particular areas, and we've had some works that we've supported through our regulatory functions to support repairs to those. But the kinds of access issues that you see in the Lower Fraser are quite different when you move into the interior. The Coldwater and the Nicola or more natural systems with some diking, but not necessarily the degree of which that you're seeing in the Lower Mainland. So still some opportunities there to improve dikes, have setbacks, allow better habitat channelization and riparian to support fish and fish habitat. So opportunities are there. They're probably different, more around channel morphology and trying to improve conditions within the stream for fish and fish habitat. So a little bit different in terms of the nature of opportunities that you might see in the Coldwater and Merritt systems versus what you might see in the Lower Mainland.
Great. Mr. Chair, I think I'll end
Thank you,
my
Mr. Hardy.
here. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. Gone a little bit over time. We'll now go to Madame Desbiens for 6 minutes.
Ms. Desbiens for 6 minutes.
You're on mute.
I still don't have my headset, so I will exchange my turn with my NDP partner. My headset will be here in a moment.
Okay, thank you. We'll go now to Ms. Barron.
And thank you to Mr. Hardy for bringing forward this study. As a resident of British Columbia and as somebody who's representing the constituents of Nanaimo Ladysmith, this is clearly something very important that's impacted British Columbia this year. I appreciate the information that's been brought forward, and I have a bunch of questions. Clearly, I won't have time to get to all of them, but the first thing I wanted to ask about is when we talk about solutions and building flood mitigation infrastructure, we often talk about intensifying what we've already built with human grey engineered solutions. Alternatively, in my riding, the City of Nanaimo has done a lot of work to make sure that we consider the natural infrastructure we have around us. For example, Buttertub's Marsh Conservation Area is evaluated as being worth $10 to $15 million as part of our storm surge infrastructure, while providing a habitat for birds and an entire natural vibrant ecosystem. My question is, as we're building from this extreme flooding event, I'm wondering how the government is helping communities ensure natural infrastructure is prioritized and enhanced as we try to balance salmon populations with protections for our communities.
Mr. Chair, if I could begin, and then I'll just quickly pass, I think, to my colleague, Mr. Fanos. I would say that's very much aligned to, in terms of DFO's role in the process, very much what we are looking to support. As Mr. Fanos leads, we have a regulatory role around protection of fish and fish habitat, but we also are looking to engage increasingly in local and regional level sort of ecosystem and integrated planning processes in order to support, as we call that, fish-friendly type approach to infrastructure. Obviously, a lot of the leadership needs to also come from the government of British Columbia and local government. So very nice to hear that's supported by your local regional district or community of Nanaimo. Obviously, we've had good initial conversations with the British Columbia government, and we're hoping to continue and have broader support along those lines. Mr. Fanos, I don't know if you want to add.
Well, the only thing I will add is certainly supporting green infrastructure and broader environmental benefits certainly complement the work DFO is doing related to fish and fish habitat. So the planning functions that the department does is going to be critical, because we're going to be certainly involved and engaged and expect to be engaged in infrastructure upgrades and opportunities for fish, which will just benefit broader environmental sort of interests, if you will. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can I move on to the next question? Just making sure I'm following process here. I'm seeing a yes. Thank you. Building off the question that I previously asked, and thank you for that response, I'm seeing a lot of fragmentation in the processes. So, we talk a lot about having a whole ecosystem approach, but I'm seeing a fragmented approach as we're spending dollars in this recovery. It's clear that habitat and species recovery, green infrastructure, climate change, adaptation, and reconciliation can all be achieved through investments in the right projects, and I'm wondering how we can see more of an alignment of priorities as we build back from this flooding.
Thanks very much for the question. And Mr. Chair, in terms of just a brief response, I would say I wholeheartedly agree. We do need an integrated approach. And one thing we are looking to do within the department under PSSI is now have a Pacific Salmon Secretariat that makes sure that we aren't siloing it even within our own departmental response. As mentioned, we also have a task team for flood response that brings in the subject matter experts from across our various program areas. Obviously, though, that's just within DFO in our department. We are also engaged in looking to engage further, and this will be over the medium to long term also, not just the immediate response, but in an interagency approach. And we expect that will be led by the BC government, but there will also be tables and opportunities to engage at that sub-regional or watershed level as well going forward. But wholeheartedly agree, we need a coordinated approach that's more holistic in nature. But as Mr. Fanos mentioned, if we can do things in a way that is fish friendly or friendly for salmon, it will tend to have broader environmental positive effects as well.
Thank you. And I just want to see if I have time for one more question in here. I'll say it. So one last thing that I wanted to ask about in this short period of time that we have is that we saw some really courageous stories of Sumas and Stolo community members, First Nation community members, working incredibly hard to save endangered salmon. We know that First Nations have been at the forefront of standing up for and to protect salmon populations. And I know you touched on First Nations, but how is DFO working in partnership with First Nations to ensure they have a voice in this conversation and at the table? Thank you.
Thanks very much for the question. Mr. Chair, I would say at all levels, we are working closely with First Nations partners. Our Minister Murray, is actually sitting, I think yesterday, on a committee of federal, provincial ministers, as well as leadership from the BC First Nations. And then at Brad and Mai's level also, we are meeting regularly with First Nations partners. Again, those like those that you mentioned that are working specifically in the Lower Fraser Valley in the watershed level, but we are also under the Pacific Salmon Strategy Initiative looking to build governance in collaborative mechanisms to work with First Nations provincially as well on salmon rebuilding and restoration in particular. So that will be something that we're looking to build together with a focus on salmon recovery and rebuilding in the coming year. Thank you.
Thank you. And note to self, I will time myself moving forward. I'm assuming I'm out of time.
Pretty close, only about 10 seconds left. So
okay, I don't think there's going to be enough time. Thank you.
No, we'll get back to you again later. We'll go back now to Madame Desbiens for 6 minutes.
Ms. Desbiens, 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the clerk for her understanding, as well as to all my colleagues. Thank you to the witnesses for being here. So here is my birthday present. Look how quickly I received it. I'd like to put this question relating to Recommendation 14. Canada recognizes that it is urgent to deal with the issues that BC fishers are having, commercial fishers, recreational fishers, and others when the fisheries restored. So there are, of course, emergency assistance measures needed for commercial, recreational, and Indigenous fisher. Is there a plan? Has assistance been targeted? Have we been able to steer the assistance significantly and with precision?
Thank you for the question. If I will just jump right in, if that's all right, Mr. Chair. Yes, with regards to the closures announced last year, particularly for the commercial harvesters, and as well as the ones going forward and anticipated over the longer term, we are currently actually meeting with commercial harvesters on the West Coast, salmon fishermen, and talking to them both in terms of what those longer term closures we think will need to look like for the next 1 or 2, 3 cycles of salmon in order to rebuild and restore those populations to a sustainable level, but also how we can help mitigate the real impacts to them. And a key component of that will be a license retirement program. And we are just consulting right now with fishers on that, looking to have it launched though prior to the start of this fishing season. Thank you.
Merci infiniment.
Thank you. The impact of on the economy of marketing Pacific salmon outside British Columbia, has that been assessed? Are there impacts on declines in salmon stocks, for example, caused by the flooding? The Canadian market, the foreign market. In Quebec, we're concerned about the capacity of conserving stocks. So will there be an impact on future stocks? Because we are seeing a decline in many of the foods on our shelves. Will there be an impact on these stocks?
Thanks very much for the question. I did mention in my opening remarks just how many of these populations, unfortunately, are already under consideration for COSUIC, particularly in the lower southern portion of British Columbia, our sockeye and Chinook. And sockeye largely have been targeted as some other salmon species for commercial for harvesting, and that's for both a domestic and a broader market. So we have seen downward returns in many of those for some time. We are working with fishermen not only on fishing opportunities, but on how to best set themselves up in terms of resiliency going forward. But I would say, yes, just like the Big Bar landslide, which I know you have looked into as a committee as well. Unfortunately, the floods are another now natural incident And I think it points to the need for climate adaptation and just recognition that opportunities for fishing commercially on salmon will be quite variable, and we need to be working with industry to manage and weather that storm ahead. And that work is already underway, and will definitely be continuing over the next few years under the PSSI.
Do I have any time left, Mr. Chairman? I haven't been timing myself. I'm sorry. Generally, I do. 2 minutes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your answer, which is very enlightening. Can we envisage a situation in which the export portion of our resource bank could be reduced to make up for demand in the country and in Quebec, for example? Is any consideration being given to reduce our exports so that we have enough salmon here? Is this under study or under consideration?
Thanks very much for the question. I may need to get back to you if that's all possible in writing regarding that specifically. I'd like to talk to or discuss with my fisheries management colleagues. I would say that salmon over the last several years has become a smaller and smaller share of the fish harvested on the West Coast. Obviously, it has a huge cultural and historical importance. And important to First Nations and commercial fishers as well as recreational fishers. But in terms of the overall share percentage that it represents in terms of commercial harvest in GDP, that has reduced quite significantly. So I think there is a story here around diversification into other products and other fisheries. But in terms of the actual breakdown of sort of export for versus domestic consumption of our Pacific salmon, I'd like to respond in writing if that's okay.
Okay. Thank you, Madame Desbiens. We'll now go to Mr. Fast for 5 minutes or less, please.
Well, thank you to our witnesses for appearing. Ms. Murdoch, I want to talk about dredging. Although the flood devastation in the Fraser Valley was immense, it could have been so many times worse had the Fraser dikes been breached by this atmospheric event. Your presentation addressed the steps that will be taken to restore and protect fish habitat effectively after the fact. The focus of the study is actually, and I quote, risks of flood control mitigation systems posed to wild salmon runs. The Fraser River dikes, they run all the way from Hope down to Richmond. And if they breached, the devastation would be of many orders magnitude greater. And so it behooves us as decision makers to actually turn our minds to how do we harden our infrastructure, in other words, our diking and drainage systems. One of the problems in the Fraser River, and if you speak to the mayor of Abbotsford, he'll confirm this, is that the current of the Fraser River is being redirected. Sandbars are building up, redirecting the currents up against the dikes themselves, undermining them. I believe the term that's used is avulsion. In any event, the integrity of those dikes, which are many, many decades old, is being eroded. And I believe that DFO and levels of government across Canada are going to have to put their minds to how do we protect our communities against these events that will become more and more frequent. So to get to the dredging issue, obviously DFO is deeply implicated in the dredging of rivers. Have you turned your mind to the possibility of increasing the dredging to ensure that the flow of the river doesn't further undermine the integrity of the dikes?
Thanks very much for the question. Mr. Chair, I would just say that we are looking to take a medium to long-term view of this. Obviously, there was an emergency response phase, but we do need to be planning for future climate events and how do we adapt. I'm going to pass this, though, to Mr. Fanos, who's much more familiar with the different types of infrastructure and projects that may likely be considered in sort of our role in it as a key regulator to protect fish and fish habitat.
Yes, thank you for the question, Mr. Fast. In terms of the work that the department does with other local jurisdictions, the Vancouver Port Authority, for example, around dredging in the Fraser River, we're actively involved in terms of the annual sort of maintenance, if you will, for many of the channels, particularly as they relate to navigation. When you look at the opportunities for broader flood protection in the context of climate adaptation, and I think we're all familiar with the work that's happening in the Greater Vancouver Regional District at the various local levels around the concerns that you've just flagged and raised with respect to elevation of the dikes and the risks for broader flooding and economic and personal impacts. Departments involved in the planning exercises that are currently underway to assess what are the mitigations that are required. Some of it would be and potentially could be dredging, but others could be dike design, movement of dikes, access for drainage around dikes. So there's quite a number of mitigations. So the department is engaged, particularly with BC. BC's obviously got some lead jurisdiction here in terms of how they're designing and maintaining and upgrading these particular systems. And so we work in collaboration with the other local and provincial authorities, and in this case, the Vancouver Port Authority, to look at all those opportunities with respect to mitigation for the longer term climate adaptation needs that we're seeing.
Mr. Fanos, you mentioned you're looking at a number of mitigations. If it's not dredging, you mentioned moving the dikes, but that is horrifically expensive. In fact, if you look at just British Columbia alone and the diking improvements that will have to be made, including seismic improvements, the cost is in the many, many, many billions of dollars. And when you run that off across Canada, we're talking probably about $1 trillion bill eventually. With those kinds of expenses, it seems to me that a cautious, careful approach to dredging might, at least in the interim, be a resolution to this challenge. I had a chance to actually tour the Fraser to see the condition of the dikes, and you can see the erosion that's happening, and it's happening from the currents that are being redirected by the sandbars that are not being dredged at this point in time. Does DFO actually have a default policy of some kind that dredging is generally frowned upon unless there is an emergent issue to be dealt with?
Sorry, Mr. Fast, I would say to the witnesses, if you could provide an answer to that particular question in writing, it would be appreciated. Mr. Fast, we've gone over the allotted time. We'll move on now to Mr. Hardy for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And actually, in deference to Mr. Fast, yes, I'd like to hear an answer to that question, and particularly whether or not dredging would also have a damaging effect on salmon runs. Mr. Fanos, you were sort of almost right to get into it there, so away you go.
Thank you. Yes, I thought it was a good opportunity to maybe explain some more. So in terms of our role for dredging first, and then I'll move into some of the impacts that could be associated with the dredging, but the role that the department has with respect to dredging, we're not the lead for water management, for flood management, for drainage. This is a provincial jurisdiction. So we really work in collaboration with others. So our role is sort of approval of the dredging as we're looking at the impacts from the regulatory perspective on the impacts to fish and fish habitat. So we support the thinking and the work that's going into what are the best prescriptions to manage flood and drainage in the Lower Mainland. Again, secondary role to provide advice in terms of how that may impact fish and fish habitat. So again, provincial sort of jurisdiction and local government. In terms of the impacts to fish and fish habitat, absolutely. When we look at these projects and these mitigations, if it's dredging, we look at the various impacts that we could be seeing to whether it's juvenile or adult species and habitats in those locations. There could be spawning habitats, rearing habitats for important species that could be impacted. There's times of the year that are particularly sensitive when fish at different life stages are in the water. So there are significant potential impacts to fish and fish habitat as associated with dredging. It's in-water work, so it's disturbing their habitats. It may be disturbing individuals. It could harm, even kill individuals, depending on the time of year they do it. So it's a serious piece of work. It's important. We have a lot of expertise that we've worked over the years with various local governments to ensure there's dredging that's going on, because it's required and critical for a variety of reasons, dredging, flood management being one, but also for navigation. So we're actively engaged and absolutely to conserve and protect the fish and fish habitat values that are in those systems.
That actually leads to another question with respect to fish. I mean, we've been obviously focused on salmon, but there are other species in the river. Has the flooding impacted other species? If so, which species are they? Secondly, do flood control measures also impede, for instance, the access to spawning, etc., for other important species up and down the Fraser?
Sorry,
you can take that one, Mr. Fanos.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So other species, absolutely. We certainly have a keen interest, as you know, with the salmon, but there are other species, freshwater species. There's sturgeon. There's actually SARA-listed species in sumas, for example, with Nooksack dace and Salish sucker. So there's other species that are potentially impacted from the flooding events. As we said earlier, many of the impacts with the flooding will be hard to sort of determine at this particular juncture. We're going to have to do assessments over time to look at the channel morphologies, to look at the stock assessments from a fish perspective to understand what stocks might have been impacted. So absolutely is quite a diverse array of potential impacts. I should note that these are natural events that often impact habitat features, i.e. scalping gravel away that fish might want to spawn in, but they also generate new habitats, off-channel habitats, spawning habitats. So there is a positive and a potential negative feature to these kinds of hydrologic events that you're seeing. And in terms of the mitigation, yes, the Fraser, as you've kind of alluded to, is a critical migration corridor for many upriver salmon species, not just salmon, not just Pacific salmon, but also with resident species as well. So there are potential impacts with those. I think in nature of the Fraser River itself, I don't think that corridor looked to have any impacts with respect to those migratory sort of patterns, if you will. It was more those adjacent systems that drain into the Fraser that were just really impacted by the heavy rainfalls and the increases in hydrologic graphs in those particular systems.
Great. Thank you for that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. We'll now go to Madame Desbiens for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Following up to what I said earlier, could we look at the St. Lawrence River in this context? The St. Lawrence River could have similar problems given the complexity and the surprises that climate change reserves for us. So some of our species in the St. Lawrence could be threatened as well. There are St. Lawrence River experts, so could we not have a bit of flexibility to manage our own resources in the St. Lawrence River, or at least a group from Fisheries and Oceans with members of the group who are specialized in the St. Lawrence River to discuss these issues?
Thanks very much for the question. As you know, both my colleague, Mr. Fanos, and I are from Pacific region, so not very familiar with the details of what's going on in the St. Lawrence, other than I would just say I know at a national context, climate adaptation is something we're considering across all of our program areas. And I don't know, Mr. Fanos, if you've got some specific, looks like you might have some specific info regarding what's happening in that region. Go ahead.
Well, no, it's a good question. And I think what I would say just additionally is, yes, absolutely, we don't have any detailed knowledge from the Quebec or St. Lawrence area, but we do know that there's many other jurisdictions in Canada that have experienced flooding events as we've seen. And there's some expertise throughout Canada, be it in Edmonton from floods there, Winnipeg and other locations. So I think there are examples, like you say, whether it's St. Lawrence and others, that we're going to draw from in terms of that medium and long-term planning for sure.
Thank you, Madame Devien. There's 20 seconds left, but I don't think that gives you much time to get a question and an answer.
Thank you.
We'll now go to Ms. Barron for 2.5 minutes or less, please.
Sorry, I had to get my button there. So one of the concerns that has been brought forward to me is around the potential introduction of petrochemical and other toxins into salmon habitat as a result of the flooding. I understand that there's research being done to fully understand the situation at the moment, but is that something DFO is currently monitoring, and could you expand on that? Thank you.
Mr. Fenniston, yeah, go ahead.
No, thank you for the question. And Mr. Chair, the response in this is, department works in collaboration with others on the water quality issues, and you've referenced petrochemicals. And so these are the jurisdiction for Environment Canada climate change, as well as the provincial authorities responsible for sort of the water quality, if you will, of deleterious type substances that may be needed to be controlled for entry into freshwater systems. So it's not our direct jurisdiction in DFO to do that work, but we work with others where there's impacts to fish habitat where they have the primary jurisdiction. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to try to sneak in one last question here. But this is around disaster funding support from advocates. And I'm hearing that a lot of times fish-friendly infrastructure has larger sticker prices attached. I'm wondering if the DFO will adjust the funding criteria for flood control infrastructure projects to ensure federal dollars are not spent on projects that block access to fish habitat or on pumps that kill salmon.
I can begin. I guess I would say, in terms of our funding programs that the DFO administers, we are certainly looking for things that further support and protect fish and fish habitat, and do ways in a way that are forward thinking in terms of climate adaptation going forward. So, the additional costs, as long as it's a solid project and meets the program criteria, I think the type of work you're talking about would be where it has positive outputs for salmon would be well received. You may be referring to some of the broader funding that's being managed by the provincial government in terms of broader response. And I don't know, Mr. Fanos, if you've got anything to suggest there, other than the fact that work still does require regulatory permits and necessary requirements to show that it is not harming fish or fish habitat. And so that would be a key part of our process, as well as participating in the planning.
Thank you for that. Your time is up. We'll now go to Mr. Strahl for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank the witnesses for coming today. Obviously, in the Fraser Valley, we experienced a major flooding event. I think that's why Mr. Fast and I are here. What I saw certainly was private citizens kind of rushing into the breach, if you can put it that way, to not only help with search and rescue and animal rescue, etc., but shortly after the Fraser Valley Angling Guides Association, professional guides, use their own boats, their own fuel, their own expertise to rescue not only salmon, but stranded salmon, but stranded sturgeon as well, endangered species. And I'm just wondering if you have reached out to those groups that did incur significant costs and used a significant amount of time to compensate them for their efforts to save our precious salmon and sturgeon resources that were impacted so drastically by that flood event. Good question.
Thanks very much for the question. I know we had a team, part of an integrated interagency approach as part of that emergency response phase. Mr. Fennis and I are looking more at sort of what we do now in terms of the rebuilding and the restoration going forward. And I know, for instance, our conservation protection folks were on the ground in boats out in the water supporting other emergency response providers. I think I would need to get back to you in terms of the direct engagement with those individual citizens, as you mentioned. I know we saw a lot of them on the news. And in terms of particularly their ongoing involvement in the next phase of work, we'd have to get back to you on that.
Right. I do think that as we go forward, they do need to be acknowledged for not waiting. They did get permits, but they certainly didn't wait around. They saved a lot of displaced fish in those critical days following. I wanted to follow up as well on the issue of debris in the Fraser River. There was an unprecedented washouts of a lot of material, thousands of cubic meters now stranded, I would say, on the banks of the Fraser River, waiting to be pushed down river by the spring freshet. Is there a plan in place to ensure that efforts to prevent more significant damage to flood protection infrastructure, if that stuff all comes down at the same time, we are going to have massive damage to infrastructure downriver? So I'm wondering if there is a plan in place to ensure that fisheries regulations, permitting, et cetera, are all streamlined so that red tape doesn't prevent the necessary cleanup that needs to take place before the spring freshet comes through.
I can take this question, Sarah, if it's appropriate, Mr. Chair. Yes, DFO often provides support and advice to provincial authorities that do debris management in the Fraser, largely for protection of infrastructure and for navigation control and safety. So we will continue to provide advice. I think you make an excellent point in terms of the streamlined process, so you're familiar with it, the process is there. And as we've done with the flood works in the November, December, our teams were actively involved with all the local authorities and the people needing to do the work to make sure that we had timely responses. So we'll continue that work in the spring. As Sarah indicates, this is work that's going to continue over the next several weeks and months and perhaps even years. So we'll be making that a priority for sure.
And finally, if I have time, there was certainly some criticism on the ground that federal assets, federal boats, for instance, fisheries boats were not deployed to assist residents who were quickly found themselves in a very dangerous situation, and that again that fell to private citizens. Have you done a review, or are you in the process of reviewing the response of DFO in terms of whether the assets that were in the area, the individuals in the area, et cetera, were deployed appropriately and quickly enough given the emergency that we were facing in the Fraser Valley?
Thanks for the question. Yes, as part of any sort of involvement in emergency response activities or incident response, a post review is undertaken. In the case of this work, I just want to emphasize again how much of an interagency it was, not only across federal agencies, but with the province and other local government. So that process may take a bit longer, but DFO will certainly be a part of that, and learning lessons from our role and how we can work more effectively with other agencies in events like this in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Strahl. We'll now go to Mr. Hardy for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Information from Library of Parliament suggests that flood control systems along the lower Fraser is fundamentally cut off 80 to 90% of the fish habitat. Now, the legislation in British Columbia says that, if you build something that uses, diverts, obstructs, impounds, or otherwise changes the natural flow or course of any river, you have to have some means by which the fish can get around or over it. But I guess what I need from you is what is the situation right now especially with the dikes and the pumping stations? Have those systems actually been put in place or not?
I'll just start and then pass it quickly over to Mr. Fanos and say that if there is a silver lining to the flood events that we saw, it is the fact that much of the infrastructure that was put in place, I think, as Mr. Fanos mentioned, is from the 50s or it's quite old in nature. Building forward, there is an opportunity to do it in a way that is much greener and more fish friendly. But Mr. Fanos, did you want to quickly add?
Yes, Mr. Hardy, the department certainly is looking right now. So you're asking what perhaps is our role right now with the existing challenges that you've described. And so maybe there's two different angles that we're working on. One, as systems are coming up for works, maintenance, repairs, provincial authorities are planning and getting permits provincially for that. We typically try to provide advice in those processes to determine whether or not there's permitting from DFO. And that's the time when we engage and look for the avoidance mitigation. And if we need to offset measures here, so we're getting better inputs or sort of better conditions for fish. So that's one way. The existing facilities that aren't going under any reviews right now do cause serious concerns and problems. We've been working, certainly taking some lead from the various ENGO groups who've done a lot of work in this area, particularly Watershed Watch, and trying to understand some of the opportunities that they see in collaboration with Indigenous groups and local governments to work with existing facilities that have been in place for some time. We all know, I think, the costs associated with many of these upgrades are substantial, not just in the flood gate access issues that would be a particular concern for DFO, but also just the general maintenance of these dikes and facilities. So,
okay, maybe I can intercede here because my time is short. Pumping stations, I understand that they've been identified as really a serious concern. What is the state? How many pumping stations are in need of either a retrofit or replacement along the lower Fraser in order to, again, open up fish habitat that could be, obviously supporting a much healthier salmon population?
And Mr. Hardy, I don't have the exact number. I'd have to get back to you on the exact number, but there are dozens, if not more, of those types of pumping stations that are either impeding migration or preventing migration. And so we're prioritizing those for action to look for these opportunities, whether it's through new funding programs, restoration programs, or infrastructure programs, to ensure that we're getting improvements to those fish passage.
Now, in terms of the international implications of this, of course, it was the Nooksack River system that I think failed, which caused the flooding in the Sumas Prairie. As well, there's a dam near Oroville, and I'm just trying to remember the name of it here. It's the, where is it here? The Enloe Dam near Oroville. That is making it very, very difficult for salmon to come up the Similkameen River. Do we have any kind of reciprocal agreement with the United States to consult back and forth across the border on measures that obviously impact the health of fish stocks in BC waters? Maybe Ms. Murdoch, you could take that.
Yeah, we definitely do have international arrangements, particularly with the U.S., given the migratory nature of salmon. There's the Columbia River Treaty process. There's obviously the Pacific Salmon Treaty process more broadly. I am not familiar enough to be able to speak to exactly what's happening regarding the Similkameen and fish migrating there. So I will have to get back to you in writing on that, Mr. Hardy.
Good, thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. We'll now go to Mr. Zimmer for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to try and make my questions as brief as possible to get through as many as I can. What role did the department take during the recent floods directly? And I'm not talking about the Vancouver downtown office. I'm talking about on the water, on the ground. Quick answer, please.
Quick answer would be we were supporting the immediate actions required to protect property and people, and at the same time trying to give advice to protect fish. So
What does that mean?
That means we're giving permits to allow work to proceed immediately.
Okay, because we've heard from our local guides, and we've seen, just as my colleague from Chilliwack has previously mentioned, we've seen a lot of work that was done, a lot of boat fuel that was used, and we haven't heard about any compensation. Is there a plan to compensate them for their efforts? Because if you're working with them, I would assume that there would be some compensation for their assistance.
Yeah, I can't, we'd have to take away on that. I don't have any information that would suggest we've compensated any of those people that have done work you've described.
Okay, and thanks for that. I guess I would go ahead quickly.
Sorry, no, I was just going to say, I would just highlight again that, we were always a supporting agency in those efforts, largely regulatory, but in some operationally on the ground where we could.
Because
but
I heard mention of ENGOs in passing, but I guess I'm concerned. I've seen this before. I'm very, know the anglers and the angling community in the Fraser Valley really across Canada very well. And I haven't seen the department work particularly well with anglers on the ground or on the water. What role will the department take in working with volunteers? Because we see some of the best work done by volunteers. We see salmon restoration happening, again, unpaid, yet we've heard record amounts of money getting dumped into the DFO, and with little showing up on the water to help the efforts of the volunteers. I guess, we see that there's a lot of cleanup to be done. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, as you've mentioned. What role will the department take working with volunteers to restore the stocks impacted by the floods?
So I can just I'll just quickly highlight, I guess, under the Pacific Salmon Strategy Initiative, we are putting an entire pillar and focus around better integration and collaboration. I've met already with the Lower Fraser Collaborative Table, which is a process that involves both anglers, commercial fishers, and Indigenous representatives in talking to them not only about fishing impacts, but as you say, their interest in really being part of the solution and leading in a lot of the solution around fish habitat restoration work.
I appreciate that, and I just have to go quickly. What I've heard from some of those conversations, it seems like there's a meeting and it's a box to be checked, but there's very little listening being done by the department. But I have one last question, I guess, and comment. We've, my colleague from Chilliwack as well has really signaled that a mark selective fishery is very important. The BC provincial government has said that the mark selective fishery is very important to our BC salmon stocks. It's even going to be more important as a result of what's happened and the impacts of these recent floods. What is the department doing now to actually implement a mark selective fishery?
I can quickly take that and say that one of the key areas and one of the key requirements for considering expansion or further mark selective fisheries is having the mass marking occurring and in place at our hatchery facilities. And under PSSI, we are...
Because we've heard this, we've actually seen this conversation has gone on for 20 years. And considering doesn't mean anything, frankly. I want to hear, because we actually heard that somebody was supposed to be appointed as a director to oversee the process of establishing the fishery, and you're saying it's just kind of a thought. What is substantively being done to implement a mark selective fishery in BC?
We are in the process of increasing our capacity to do mass marking. That is a key fundamental piece, which means where we mark the fish so that they could be fished in a mark selective fishery. That's a key initial first step. It will allow for where we can do it without impacting wild stocks, consider mark selective fisheries. But it also has a broader benefits in terms of our
timeline of when that actually is going to start. Do you have a timeline?
We are looking to expand our mark selective fishing, mark selective capacity going forward this coming year. But there is a number of ongoing conversations required with industry around where we can move forward on those mark selective fisheries proposals in a precautionary way. So that work will have to
certainly
happen in
Washington
parallel.
State, it's been done successfully for many years. And thank you,
Mr. Zimmer.
Thank you.
We went a little bit over there. We'll now go to Madame Desbiens. No, sorry. I'm looking at my sheet wrong. We'll go to Mr. Hanley for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our guests, witnesses for coming in today. I'm learning a lot. Ms. Murdoch, I know the Pacific Salmon Strategy Initiative covers Yukon as well as British Columbia. And I know that while we're here to discuss the impact of flooding and climate change on salmon stocks in BC, in Yukon, we also had flooding and high water, and we have with effects on the salmon, and we have experienced consistently poor salmon runs in the last few years. I was wondering if you could comment either now or later in writing on how you're approaching implementation of the Pacific Salmon Initiative in Yukon, and how you're working with Yukon government and Yukon First Nation governments, particularly in regard to climate change effects, including flooding and high water, and regarding salmon stocks in the Alsek and Yukon rivers. Thank you.
Thanks very much for the question. As you highlighted, the focus today has been on British Columbia, but the Pacific Salmon Strategy Initiative does apply to the Yukon territory as well. We've had initial meetings with the Yukon government at sort of the deputy level and below, just socializing this new direction for the department, and a real trying to focus on, as you say, understanding the climate effects on salmon and salmon habitat, and looking at opportunities for rebuilding and recovery. Because of the post-treaty context up there, a key important first step that we have begun is to meet directly with First Nations in the Yukon to talk about where we have shared priorities and how we can move forward on that. That conversation is expected to continue over the next few months. And we also have a unique process there that reports directly to our minister called the Yukon Salmon Subcommittee, which was created under the umbrella Yukon Agreement. We are looking to work with them and get advice from them also on how best to implement the PSSI, as we call it, up in the Yukon. So those three, I guess, groups are key to, I think, identifying the shared priorities for how PSSI can be implemented up in the Yukon context.
Thank you very much. And secondly, knowing that, to follow up on Mr. Hardy's question about international agreements, and knowing that there is a Yukon River Salmon Agreement, and how does your department work with the United States in addressing ongoing stock management and mutual threats related to climate change and flooding? Again, noting that this is a significant concern, particularly in our First Nation communities.
Yes, thanks for the question. And for those that don't know, one of the key factors in our salmon health in the salmon escapement in the Yukon context, it depends on our partnership and collaboration with Americans, given how the fish migrate. I will have to respond in writing. I'm not the lead on those Pacific Salmon Treaty negotiations or implementation, and I know there is quite an extensive amount of work that's underway. So I'd rather, if that's all right, respond in writing with their support.
Yeah, much appreciated. That would be great. Thank you. And those are my questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Hanley. We'll now go to Madame Debienne for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, I'd like to thank the witnesses. What a tremendous wealth of knowledge they have, and we really appreciate it. We were talking about groups, having small local groups in the Yukon, for example, to gain more knowledge about the environment from the community. I've also seen that this is recommendation 6 of the 32 recommendations. I know there are many. I'd like to know, and well, these recommendations were made before what happened in the Fraser River, but what are the recommendations in place that could be useful to stave off problems in the future?
Thanks very much for the questions. I'm not familiar, or I don't have handy right now exactly what recommendation 6 is, so I'll be brief and maybe you can clarify if I hit the mark. But one of the key aspects of the Pacific Salmon Strategy Initiative moving forward is a recognition that the federal government, and DFO in particular, will not be able to stem the declines we're seeing in Pacific salmon alone. We have over 200 First Nations across BC and Yukon, for which many are very passionate and have a huge historical tie in social and economic importance with salmon. We've also got, I think it's approximately 30,000 stewardship volunteers that spend their own volunteer time and hours working on salmon-related projects. We need to harness that, as well as Mr. Fanos spoke to, and I spoke to, the fact that addressing salmon habitat in particular requires a multi-jurisdictional approach with the province of BC. So building in the capacity, and we are creating a salmon stewardship directorate specifically so we have the right people in place to leverage those relationships and make sure our partners have access to whatever DFO capacity resources they need to move forward in their own priorities and in their own work to protect and rebuild salmon stocks is a key component of our work going forward. And that does represent a bit of a shift in terms of rather there's a leadership role, but that the government is going to be doing this working with others.
Thank you, Madam Debienne. There's only about 7 seconds left, not time enough for another question. So now we'll go on to Ms. Barron for 2.5 minutes.
Is that applicable to the St. Lawrence, this kind of approach, method? I'll come back, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Ms. Barron for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. That was a good use of 7 seconds. My questions are definitely a bit of a theme here. I am really trying to understand better what the infrastructure will look like as we move forward in developing systems. In particular, I'm wondering, in February 2021, the Union of BC Municipalities Executives endorsed a resolution around flood mitigation through green infrastructure and natural assets, which calls for the restoration and protection of salmon habitat compromised by outdated flood control systems. Well, I understand that this resolution was sent to the provincial government. I'm wondering if you can confirm that there's been any collaborations from DFO to help support communities who are looking to enhance their green infrastructure, and if no, why DFO has not been more proactive.
I can take this, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question. In terms of the green infrastructure work that's happening at many different jurisdictions, DFO is engaged and involved from a planning perspective to provide advice as we can with respect to the green infrastructure for fish. So we absolutely are engaged. I think there's work to do, and I think as Sarah Murdoch and I have indicated that through programming, whether it's PSSI or existing program, we're going to continue our efforts to more proactively work with others, particularly leading those infrastructure upgrades to ensure and facilitate the green outcomes. So I think you're going to see a lot more probably movement in the coming months and years on that front, and DFO is well positioned to support that.
Thank you. Thank you. My last question is, in 2016, we saw Lena Aziz, I apologize, I hope that pronunciation is correct, a project manager for Watershed Watch Salmon Society, who recommended in the committee that the federal government establish a salmon and dike fund as an interim measure until fish-friendly flood control practices become the norm through legislation and policy. I'm wondering, in the last 6 years, can you point to how DFO has shifted its approach in light of this information?
I'll take that, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question. Yes, Watershed Watch, I must say, has been doing some tremendous work, and Lena, you've referenced there as being one of the leaders there. And in terms of the funding opportunities, I don't have any indication from my particular programming around that item. But one thing that has happened over the last 2-3 years in particular was the updated Fisheries Act, as you know, in 2019. That positioned us to do more investments with staff and resources to support this proactive planning piece that you're referring to, as well as the PSSI. So that's kind of what's been happening over the last few years, is implementing new programming to be more proactive, to have better outcomes for fish.
Thank you, Ms. Barron. We'll now move on to Mr. Arnold for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank both witnesses for providing what they're able to. Ms. Murdoch, in your opening remarks, you said that flooding is likely to have impacted fish species, and then in some of the testimony, you said definitely impacted. I'd like you to, my ask would be that you define what impacts DFO has measured or being provided by other parties, and just ask that you provide that, or the department provide that to the committee in writing, please. So more onto a question now that you might be able to answer here is who at DFO Pacific is responsible for leading DFO's response to the flooding impacts, not to the flood itself, but to the impacts and restoration? Who at DFO would be responsible for that?
Thank you very much. And yes, happy to respond on the more technical aspects in writing. Right now, as I mentioned, we've got a task team as we're shifting from the emergency response phase into sort of the planning and next phase of work. And Mr. Fanos, actually, my co-witness here, is leading that work. And we do see this being a long-term need or a medium to long-term need though, over the next few years. And I did mention the PSSI and this Salmon Stewardship Directorate we are looking to establish right now. We expect to be the sort of the medium long-term sort of hosts or lead for this and that work going forward. But Mr. Fanos is leading up the interbranch work team, task team right now.
Would Mr. Fanos be responsible for coordinating the responses between the provinces, Indigenous organizations, municipalities, and other users?
Right now, we are actually our minister is participating in a committee at that level, and I understand our deputy and associate deputy are also quite engaged in the issue. So we are supporting up through that process.
Can you identify one individual that might, in the department, that might be responsible for this? Or is it part of the Pacific Salmon Strategic Initiative? Who ultimately is responsible for leading this?
So that is the intent. And myself, I am the Senior Director for the Pacific Salmon Strategy Initiative. And I also, above me, is Wes Shoemaker, is the head of the Pacific Salmon Strategy transformation. So I would say myself and Mr. Shoemaker.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, before we run out of time, I would like to make a motion here, and I apologize for others that may have questions. We may be able to get through this fairly quickly. We're obviously seeing and hearing that there are other organizations that would have input into this, particularly to this study. I believe all members have received a request from another organization wishing to provide testimony, and to only hear from the department and not from other affected bodies would, I don't think, be a fulsome study. So I would make the following motion, that the committee add one meeting to its current examination of the risks of flood control mitigation systems in British Columbia, particularly along the lower Fraser River, posed to wild salmon runs, and that in this additional meeting, the committee receive testimony from witnesses with knowledge of risks of flood control systems and mitigating impacts of such systems on wild salmon runs.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. Could you read that one more time for the interpreters? Nice, clearly and slowly, please.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. I move that the committee add one meeting to its current examination of the risks of flood control and mitigation systems in British Columbia, particularly along the lower Fraser River and posed to wild salmon runs, and that in this additional meeting, the committee received testimony from witnesses with knowledge of risks of flood control systems and mitigating impacts of such systems on wild salmon runs.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. And I think you did say that it was being sent to the clerk to distribute.
I believe it is, yes.
Okay, thumbs up, Ms. Gann. She's got it sent
from the clerk
to
that
the members.
she's received it.
Yep, and a thumbs up that she's got it sent, I think, to the other members. I'm seeing a thumbs up from Mr. Morrissey that he's received this. Everybody receive it? I think it's only Mr. Morrissey got it. Okay, Madame Debienne has thumbs up. Mr. Callaway. Mr. Hardy has it. Mr. Serge, have you received it yet? Okay. So it looks like everybody has received it. I'm not hearing anybody say no, they haven't. I presume everybody in the room has received it as well. Okay, any discussion to Mr. Hardy's additional motion? Not Mr. Hardy's, Mr. Reynolds. Mr. Hardy.
I'll take credit. Yeah, thank you, Mel, for that. I would like to offer a friendly amendment to Mr. Arnold's motion, simply adding to it the following. And that the chair issue a letter to the minister outlining the key issues requiring her oversight.
Okay, read it one more time, Mr. Hardy, to make sure the interpreters are good with it and everybody has heard it.
That came from Mr. Arnold. No, it didn't. And that the chair issue a letter to the minister outlining the key issues requiring her oversight.
Okay, we've all heard the amendment. Any discussion on the amendment? Okay, Tina, can we do a vote, a recorded vote on the amendment, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the amendment of Mr. Hardy, Monsieur Cormier.
Wait.
Mr. Hanley,
Yes.
Mr. Hardy,
Agreed.
Mr. Kellaway,
Agreed.
Mr. Morrissey,
Agree.
Mr. Arnold,
Agreed.
Mr. Perkins,
Agreed.
Mr. Small,
Agreed.
Mr. Zimmer,
Agreed.
pardon? Madame Desbiens,
Je suis en faveur.
In favor?
Ms. Barron,
Agree. 4.
Yeas pour 11.
Thank you for that. So I guess it was a friendly amendment. Everybody voted in favor of it. Now back to the motion as amended. Any discussion? Mr. Cormier?
Sorry, I had trouble with my mute button. Just a verification, Mr. Arnold, are you just talking about like one more meeting, just to make sure? Because if we keep adding meetings, like we're pushing everything back, I'm sure that Ms. Desbiens will not like to see her study going like far down the line also, and Ms. Barron also. So it's just one more meeting that you're asking for?
That's correct. Just one more meeting.
Okay, thank you. Any other further discussion on the motion as amended? Seeing none.
Mr. Chair,
can you
I've told the clerk 3 times that I'd like to speak to this, so I don't know if she hasn't heard me. Okay.
Okay, I don't think she has. Okay, Mr. Zimmer.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to say I appreciate the witnesses today from the department, but I think, they couldn't answer many of our questions specifically, and also to hear from some of those that were actually on the water, I think to help explain what the picture looks like, what's necessary down there as well, and maybe from some local officials perhaps about what could be done there. I think a first-hand account would be appreciated by this committee. Thank you. I support the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmer. Now we'll go to our clerk, Tina. Well, she's...
Mr. Chair, Ms. Barron also wishes to speak.
Oh, okay. Ms. Barron.
Thank you, Chair. Trying to figure out how to get your attention in this hybrid model here. I wanted to speak in favor of this motion. As much as I appreciate the insights and information that have been provided by those here today, there are some very valuable and key stakeholders that are not at the table. First Nation representatives, I think of the Watershed Watch Salmon Society, many that are very invested, although I recognize that we don't have endless time. We have many other studies to get to. Having one additional meeting would provide us with a much needed opportunity to hear from others who are experts in this field. So I'd like to thank the member for bringing forward this motion, and I am in favor of it.
Thank you, Ms. Barron. Seeing
Mr. Small wishes to speak. Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Go ahead, Mr. Small.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to speak in favor of this motion. One day in front of this committee for a study is not quite enough, considering the enormous impact that these floods have had on salmon year classes that are coming up in the next 3 or 4 years. So I just want to say I support an additional meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Small. Dina, are we hearing anyone else wanting to speak in the room, or can we go to a recorded vote? Right. Go ahead with the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Monsieur Cormier.
Oui.
Mr. Hanley.
Oui.
Mr. Hardy.
Oui.
Mr. Kellaway.
Oui.
Mr. Morrissey.
Yes.
Mr. Arnold.
In favor?
Mr. Perkins.
Yes.
Mr. Small.
Yes.
Mr. Zimmer.
In favor.
Madame Desbiens.
Oui, en faveur.
Merci. Ms. Barron.
In favor.
Thank you. Yeas pour 11.
Thank you, Tina. Motion is passed unanimously. And that's your time has expired, Mr. Arnold, but no doubt a good motion because everybody seemed to be in favour of it. We'll go on now to Mr. Morrissey for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question is to Madame Murdoch. You referenced a restoration unit. Could you elaborate, explain what the unit is entailed with?
Yes, thanks very much for the question. Under the PSSI, with some of the new capacity there, we are going to be building on what we have now, which is a relatively small salmon habitat resource restoration unit that provides technical advice to outside agencies around salmon restoration work. And we will be creating, I think I mentioned earlier, looking to stand this up within the next fiscal year is a full center of expertise on various aspects of technical knowledge and information, making sure it's available to others around salmon habitat in order to inform habitat restoration work. And that will be part of broader efforts we're going to be doing under a Salmon Stewardship Directorate. Thank you.
So this is a new initiative then? This will be
right.
a new expertise within DFO?
Building on what we have, a small group we have right now under our Salmon Enhancement Program, yes, expanding that quite significantly.
Okay. Could you elaborate the infrastructure that was compromised during the flooding? Who owns the infrastructure?
I think I spoke briefly to the fact that the department ourselves, DFO, has federal infrastructure that was impacted, particularly.
What infrastructure was that, Ms. Murdoch? Describe the DFO infrastructure, and then if you could elaborate on the infrastructure outside of DFO that was destroyed or compromised.
Sure. I may see if Mr. Fanis can speak more effectively to this, but in a nutshell, it was a number of our salmon enhancement facilities. Brad or Mr. Fanis, did you want to speak more specifically?
Yeah, specifically and quickly, yeah, there's facilities in the Chilliwack and in the Spias, which is the Nicola watershed hatchery operations and restoration channels, as an example, that were directly impacted by the flooding events and needing repairs. There is a number of other sort of partner restoration projects that are funded through different avenues like BC Shrift, for example, that also received some impacts associated with the high water flows that will need to be considered for repair.
So the only direct infrastructure DFO owns is primarily attached to salmon habitat, not in the area of flood control. Did I interpret you correctly?
Yeah, that's correct. The actual dikes and the infrastructure for flooding and drainage infrastructure are all wholly owned either by the provincial or local authorities.
Okay. Ms. Murdoch, you referenced a license retirement plan. Could you elaborate on that? Is that primarily for salmon?
Yeah, so under the Pacific Salmon Strategy Initiative, there's actually 4 pillars. I think most relevant to this discussion around flood response was our conservation and stewardship and our collaboration pillars. But we actually have a whole area of focus around harvest transformation to work with Indigenous recreational commercial fisheries, projecting out what's likely to be much more modest opportunities for harvesting salmon over the next 2 to 3 cycles or 10 to 15 years, and how we can work with each group. On the commercial side, there was some significant closures announced last year. We are consulting right now on long-term closures, and is recognizing that the impacts that has to fishers. We are working with them right now on finalizing the details of a license retirement program, which will be voluntary but open to commercial salmon license holders.
And this will be a permanent retirement. They'll be removed totally.
That's right.
Yes. Okay. Again, it was referenced earlier, the updated Fishery Act, which this committee reviewed some time ago. How will that act now impact the rebuilding of infrastructure going forward? It will influence it. Who wants, Mr. Fanos?
I can take that. I appreciate the question, and Mr. Chair and committee. The Fisheries Act changes certainly had a couple different prongs of influence on what we're seeing here today. One being the regulatory authorities, reinstatement of HAD and the regulatory authorities that we have in the scale and scope, number one. There's engagement programming. We have grants and contribution programming that we work with Indigenous partners on. The Indigenous Habitat Participation Program is an example where we try to facilitate funding opportunities to support Indigenous engagement in the departmental activities related to habitat. And then certainly the other changes, certainly around the proactive planning piece to restore lost protections and get in front on a more proactive scale, working with others like the province and local authorities to have better outcomes for fish.
I believe my time's up.
Yeah, it is. Thanks, Bobby. We'll go now on my list it says Mr. Fast, but I noticed Mr. Small is back. So I'll leave it to you two gentlemen to decide which one of you are going to use the 5 minutes, or if you're splitting your time or whatever. So whoever is either Mr. Fast or Mr. Small, please, for 5 minutes or less.
Mr. Chair, I'll be ceding my time to Mr. Arnold. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fast. Mr. Arnold, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask Ms. Murdoch about the Pacific Salmon Strategic Initiative. When Minister Jordan announced the PSSI, she repeatedly stated that it would be built from the ground up. That was her quote. Today we've heard from you that today we've heard that the PSI is the government's primary response conduit for fish affected by the floods. So obviously the PSSI is up and running. So what is the current status of the PSSI? And can you give us a ballpark figure of the PSSI, whether it's 10% established, 20%, 50%? Could you provide us some information?
Mr. Chair, you're on mute as well.
Apologies for that. Yes, no, I'm happy to respond. As you know, Minister Jordan made that first announcement in June, right before the salmon commercial fishing season. We spent much of the summer and then post-election period, the later fall, early winter, engaging at a broad level on the salmon strategy initiative. We've now launched and are into what we call early implementation, identifying some key priorities and action areas of work under each of the 4 pillars. And consulting quite broadly with First Nations and provincial government, Yukon government, and other parties on moving forward, both on the short term on some immediate action areas. And as I said, they don't necessarily we're never intended. We didn't envision what happened in the fall in terms of the floods, but we do think PSSI is well positioned to lead our flood response going forward.
Well positioned,
so
would that
things
be?
Like I mentioned, the launching.
Well positioned, would that be 50% functional, 75% functional, fully functional?
No, I would say we're still in very early days. We're looking to initiate most of our key activities starting the start of the next fiscal year. We are still sort of, I would say, largely in a planning period right now, identifying key priorities to launch this spring.
Okay, thank you. In your opening remarks today, you spoke about prioritizing actions to mitigate the impacts and support restoration of fish habitat and include the province, Indigenous groups, and others to assess the impacts and determine the effective short-term, long-term actions to promote recovery. What is the current status of these points, and what organizations have been able to provide input or will be able to provide input?
I think, go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, I can take the question. Thank you. In terms of what's happening right now, the first item that we're doing is working internally with the different expertise within the department. We have science, we have the habitat program that is helping people restore some of the infrastructure to roads and dikes. So we have that expertise. We have contribution program expertise to make sure we're connecting with various opportunities for funding different activities. We have restoration expertise in the department, as Sarah alluded to. So we're bringing those people together in a team to make sure that we can understand what the assessments are required to understand the impacts. As we said, it's going to be months and years for us to assess given the life history of salmon. So we're trying to position ourselves to use existing assessments to understand that. We're trying to set priorities based on stock status and habitat conditions to prioritize our actions to work with others. So we're really preparing ourselves as a department to have a coordinated response to support the provincial agencies, the environmental agencies, and others that are positioned. We're actually doing work with the Pacific Salmon Foundation to do some assessments around imagery around some of the impacted systems. So we'll continue to be working with First Nations and others to understand their interests and try to support those activities in a timely manner.
Okay, thank you. Also in the opening remarks, you talked about reevaluating current restoration techniques. Now, are these previously existing techniques, or are they being evaluated prior or after they're being applied? When you're reevaluating current restoration techniques, again, are those techniques that have been in place for some period of time or current new techniques?
Yes, we've been working with community partners for decades, in various levels in types of salmon restoration work, both at the local scale and more broadly watershed scale. What we're realizing with climate adaptation and the need to plan for flooding events, fires, and things of the scale, that we thought we would only see in one every 100 years, now happening in one every few years, is that we need to take stock of what we know and make sure that we're applying the latest science, the latest research, not only from our own jurisdiction here in Canada or in British Columbia, but more broadly in Canada, as well as jurisdictions around the world who are also working around this idea of fish and fish habitat restoration, and how do we prepare for events like what we saw in terms of the floods.
You mentioned taking stock.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. Thank you, Mr. Arnold. Your time has gone over. We now go to Mr. Hardy for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2021 was a hard year on British Columbia. You know, we had the heat dome, we had the fires. Historically, the mountain pine beetle, of course, devastated so many forests, and there's logging. The logging still goes on. And then along comes this atmospheric river. We used to call it the Pineapple Express, but I guess atmospheric river sounds more scientific. Do we have an assessment as to what all of these deforestations meant in terms of the land's ability to handle the runoff? Did that contribute to the severity of the flooding? Who can, Mr. Fennos?
I can take that, Mr. Hardy, and thank you for the question. Yes, I think what you're describing is really what we're putting our mind to from a science perspective. So DFO Science and Habitat is working with certainly the provincial agencies who are doing work around climate adaptation, around cumulative effects, as you describe it, on the number of different activities, whether it's water management, whether it's fire, whether it's forestry management, agriculture, all under provincial jurisdiction. So they're doing planning exercises now to position ourselves to be more resilient in the future, and DFO will be part of that work.
And what about the riparian areas that are supposed to be preserved next to streams, etc.? Do we need to review those standards, particularly in light of the extent of the deforestation that we've seen?
Yeah, I think as Ms. Murdoch indicated, I think we need to reevaluate all the work that we're doing right now to make sure that we're putting our minds to the changes in climatic conditions and how we may need to have different approaches. So riparian's always been recognized as an important element, and that may be something we need to closely look at to ensure we have the capacity there to support the aquatic ecosystems with the buffer zones of the riparian.
This one last question from me, it really has to do with the connectivity and the coordination. I was looking at the BC legislation, and I couldn't see anything in there that's noted the requirement to consult with the DFO, you know, when they're dealing with anything that was going to manage flows of water in the province. Where is that that requirement nested? Is it in a letter of agreement between us and the province? Where is it?
Yeah, Mr. Hardy, the requirements under the Fisheries Act and people doing work in and about a stream obviously will be indicated of a permit requirement through DFO. In terms of how we work with the province, it's through collaborative processes. There's no requirement in the provincial process. They have a Water Sustainability Act that also conserves and protects fish and fish habitat, and is the lead jurisdiction for water. There's authorities that they have to ensure protection of fish and their habitats. So there are no official mechanisms, but we are working collaboratively with BC to improve those processes, to streamline processes and ensure gaps are met.
So are you confident that we're catching all of the things that we need to catch in order to have that oversight, or do we need something more formal?
If I could jump in.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think there's definitely always room for improvement, and that's one thing under the Pacific Salmon Strategy Initiative we are looking to. They have definitely sent positive, BC government has sent positive signals and their own interest in doing a wild salmon strategy. But we are looking at the potential for more structured collaborative approaches to work on all areas of salmon rebuilding and restoration.
Well, I'd like to thank you both. You've obviously stimulated a lot more conversation here, and I'm looking forward to the next session where we talk to some of the other stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. We'll now go on to Madame Desbiens for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to take the opportunity to applaud the interpreters. You're exceptional, and thank you. I have a question. There is going to be a study on labeling soon. We talked about it very briefly. What are your recommendations for labeling for seafood products in Canada, generally speaking?
That is an area of work I know happening not only from my regional Pacific region colleague in fisheries management, but also our national group. And if it's okay, I would rather respond back. I'm not directly involved in that work. Although I do know traceability is a key issue for the fish harvesting sector in British Columbia as well as across the country.
Mr. Chairman, would it be possible for that answer to be repeated, please?
Yes, no problem. When you're ready, Ms. Murdoch.
Yes, apologies. I'll talk a little slower. I was just saying that I know my colleagues in Pacific region here on the West Coast working in fisheries management, as well as being led from my national colleagues working on fish management, that the issue of traceability and labeling is a key area of focus for them. I'm not directly involved, so if possible, I'll coordinate with them to make sure we have a written response for you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madame Debian. We'll now go to Ms. Barron for 2.5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask specifically, I know we've been emphasizing much of what has occurred in the Fraser River, which understandably because that, has seen a huge impact from the flooding. But I was also hoping to have you speak a little bit on some of the other rivers in BC that have had salmon populations impacted by the flooding, such as the Colquitts River and the Millstream Creek on Vancouver Island. I know you mentioned Vancouver Island briefly in your statement, but was hoping you could expand on that a little bit.
I'm going to ask my colleague, Mr. Fanos, if he's more familiar with this. I'm not familiar with the specific work, but I know certainly there is assessment work happening on Vancouver Island as well as the Fraser, but maybe Mr. Fanos might know more.
Yeah, I think to be short, we'd have to do a takeaway. We have staff in the field in the area offices that do support actions that are happening in various watersheds and systems that have been impacted by floods. It's not uncommon, as I think we all know, throughout the winter months, we do get many systems throughout British Columbia and Yukon that have these flooding events. So it's largely an area delivery program that Fisheries has with CNP officers and science and fish managers that work in the area offices to sort of respond to different activities that may be occurring. But we could find out for those two systems if you're looking for that information.
Thank you. Another question I have is around, I'm wondering if you can clarify the cost to salmon and other fish populations if we return back to the same type of unfriendly pumping stations and dike systems that we have in place in many areas. In the last session, we had a recommendation from our Pacific salmon study which suggested that DFO should review flood mitigation infrastructure. I know we're all hoping for a calmer 2022, but I'm wondering if you can give us a better sense of what that might look like for us to better protect our salmon populations and having more friendly pumping stations and dike systems.
Thanks for the question. I would say that given our regulatory environment right now, particularly with the new Fisheries Act, there is no going back. As Mr. Fennis mentioned, as that infrastructure comes up for repairs or retrofits or changes or needing replacement, the new regulatory regime applies, and that's both the DFO, the federal regarding fish and fish habitat, but also provincial standards. In terms of the other part of your question, though, in terms of the idea of a fund, I do think there will be opportunities for whether it's BC SHRIF or other federal funds that are directed towards salmon habitat, salmon restoration work in general of those types of projects being eligible. But I did want to highlight also, the role of the province in this work. They are the lead agency or lead regulatory authority around this type of work, and they have expressed also an interest in this idea of green and fish-friendly infrastructure. So we will be looking to them also in terms of both the funding that flows through them and their own funding that they're putting towards that end.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Perkins.
I know we're about to conclude. I just wanted to move that in the interest of the urgency of the study, that the witnesses or the suggested witnesses be, for the second session, be tabled with the clerk by 5 p.m. Thursday, February 10th.
Mr. Perkins, you can't move a motion on a point of order. But we can set a deadline for witnesses before we end off.
Fair enough.
Thank you. Okay, I thought somebody else was looking to speak. That concludes our formal session of today's meeting. I want to say thank you, of course, to Ms. Murdoch and Mr. Fanos for joining us today. And we'll allow those people to sign off, and we'll get back to your deadline for witnesses, Mr. Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the committee members. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And Mr. Perkins, based on your request, I would suggest probably if we could set a deadline of 5 p.m. on Friday for the submission of witnesses.
That's fine with me, Mr. Chair.
Everybody else in agreement with that? No disagreement? Okay, all thumbs up. So there you go, done, easy and smooth. It's exactly the time for the end of the meeting, so it didn't even take any extra time. I want to say thank you to the clerk and the analysts, and of course our wonderful team of translators for a great job again today. And thank you to the committee members for such a cordial meeting and interaction with the staff from DFO. So again, have a good evening, everyone. We'll see you back on Thursday.